The champagne glass trembles in my hand as I watch Derek work the room at his company's annual gala. He's animated, confident, completely in his element as he gestures toward the quarterly reports projected on the massive screen. His colleagues hang on every word, and why wouldn't they? Derek Chen has always been magnetic. It's what drew me to him 5 years ago when we were both grinding through MBA programs. What they don't see is how his eyes skip right over me when I wave from across the ballroom. How he introduces me as my wife Sophia with the same enthusiasm someone might use to mention they brought an umbrella, just in case. I take a sip of champagne and taste nothing but the metallic tang of my own anxiety. Tomorrow, I'll pretend this doesn't hurt. Tonight, I'll smile and nod when his Princeton buddies make jokes I don't quite catch, laugh at stories about deals I helped research but never get credit for. I'll be the supportive wife who looks good in photos and doesn't interrupt the important conversations. But right now, watching Derek's hand rest casually on his colleague Amanda's lower back as he leans in to whisper something that makes her laugh, I feel like I'm disappearing piece by piece. My name is Sophia Castellanos, and 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I'm 31, a senior financial analyst at Morrison and Associates, and I've spent the last 3 years building what I believed was a solid marriage with Derek. We met during a particularly brutal corporate finance seminar where the professor seemed determined to crush everyone's soul by week 3. Derek was the guy who always had the right answer, who made complex valuations look effortless. I was the one frantically taking notes, trying to keep up while simultaneously working 20-hour days at my internship. But I had something he didn't, an intuitive understanding of market patterns that came from growing up watching my immigrant father analyze every purchase, every investment, every financial decision with the careful precision of someone who knew what it meant to lose everything. My dad, Miguel, came to the States with nothing but a mechanical engineering degree that nobody here recognized and a fierce determination to build something lasting. He ended up managing a small auto repair shop, but he never stopped studying markets, never stopped believing that financial literacy was the key to real security. Every Sunday dinner was an informal economics lesson, and by the time I was 16, I could spot accounting irregularities in quarterly reports the way other kids could spot plot holes in movies. Derek found this fascinating at first. He'd bring me his case studies, and I'd catch things he missed, subtle patterns in cash flow statements, red flags in merger documents. "You have this weird gift," he'd say, and I'd glow under his attention. "You see things differently." After graduation, we both landed jobs in the city. Derek went to a prestigious investment firm where his Princeton network opened doors faster than his actual performance could. I went to Morrison and Associates, a mid-sized firm that specialized in forensic accounting and corporate restructuring. Not as glamorous, but the work was complex and challenging, and I was good at it. Really good at it. Within 18 months, I was leading fraud investigations for companies with 9-figure revenues. My analyses had helped recover millions in embezzled funds and identified accounting irregularities that saved clients from catastrophic investments. My colleagues started calling me the Bloodhound because I could track financial discrepancies through layers of shell companies and creative bookkeeping. But at home, Derek's interest in my weird gift was fading. Success looked different on him: sharper suits, later nights, stories about deals that were always just a little bigger than whatever I was working on. When I'd try to share something interesting from my day, he'd nod distractedly while scrolling through his phone. "That's nice, babe," became his standard response to everything. The wedding was beautiful, held at a vineyard in Napa that Derek's parents insisted on paying for. I felt like I was floating through someone else's dream in my ivory silk dress, surrounded by Derek's impressive network of friends and colleagues. My own guest list was smaller: family, a few close friends from work, my college roommate Alina, who flew in from Chicago. "Are you sure about this guy?" Alina had asked during the reception, watching Derek hold court with a group of groomsmen who were loudly debating cryptocurrency investments. "He barely looked at you during the ceremony." I laughed it off. "He's just excited. You know how he gets around his Princeton crowd." But Alina's words stuck with me because they echoed something I'd been trying not to notice. Derek was most himself when I wasn't around, most animated when discussing topics where my input wasn't needed or wanted. The first 2 years of marriage were fine. Not passionate, not terrible, just fine. We had our routines. Derek would work late, I'd handle most of the household logistics, and weekends were for social obligations with his colleagues or quiet dinners where we'd catch up on each other's weeks like polite roommates. I threw myself into my work, taking on increasingly complex cases. I developed a reputation for being able to untangle the most convoluted financial schemes, and Morrison and Associates started assigning me their highest profile clients. I loved the detective work, the satisfaction of following money trails that led to answers, the way scattered pieces would suddenly click into a coherent pattern. But success at work couldn't fill the growing emptiness at home. Derek and I were living parallel lives that occasionally intersected for dinner parties and family gatherings. I started to feel like a supporting character in my own life, always adapting to his schedule, his priorities, his vision of what our marriage should look like. The breaking point came, as these things often do, on an ordinary Tuesday night. I'm reviewing quarterly reports for a client when Derek walks into our home office, still in his suit but with his tie loosened, and that particular energy he gets when something big is happening at work. "Sophia, we need to talk." I save my work and turn to face him, noting the way he's standing in the doorway rather than coming into the room, already maintaining distance. "I've been thinking about us," he continues, "and I don't think this is working anymore." The words don't register immediately. I've been expecting many conversations over the past year, about his late nights, about why we never seem to sync up anymore, about the way he introduced me as just my wife to his new managing director last week. But not this one. "What do you mean?" My voice sounds surprisingly steady. Derek runs a hand through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. "We want different things. You're so focused on your little forensic accounting projects, and I need someone who can keep up with where my career is heading. Amanda and I." Amanda? The name cuts through my composure like a blade. Amanda Worthington, the blonde Harvard MBA who joined Derek's firm 6 months ago, the one who laughs at all his jokes and somehow always ends up next to him at company events. We've been talking, and we realized we have this connection. She understands the demands of high-level finance in a way that, he pauses, looking for the right words. She gets it, Sophia. She gets what it takes to really succeed. I stare at him, this man I've shared a bed with for 3 years, and feel like I'm seeing him clearly for the first time. So this is about Amanda. This is about compatibility, about building something significant together. His voice takes on the confident tone he uses in client presentations. "Look, you're good at what you do, really good at finding problems in other people's books. But that's not the same as creating value, as building wealth. Amanda and I were both on partnership tracks. We can actually support each other's ambitions." The dismissal in his voice when he says, "finding problems," hits deeper than I expected. 3 years of marriage, and he's never understood that my work involves rebuilding companies after fraud nearly destroys them, that I've helped save thousands of jobs by identifying corruption before it metastasizes. "And what exactly do you think I've been doing for the past 5 years?" I ask. Derek shifts uncomfortably. "I'm not trying to diminish your work, Sophia, but be realistic. You're a forensic accountant at a mid-tier firm. Amanda's on track to make managing director before she's 35. I made senior analyst at 29. It's not the same league." He says this gently, like he's explaining something obvious to a child. "Look, I'll be fair about the divorce. You can keep the apartment for now, and I won't fight you on the assets, but I need you to understand this isn't personal. It's just that Amanda and I make sense together professionally. We're building something bigger than either of us could achieve alone." I feel something cold and sharp settle in my chest. What about what we built together? "What did we build, Sophia? Really?" Derek's voice is not unkind, just matter of fact. "We're roommates who split expenses and show up to each other's work events. Amanda challenges me intellectually. She makes me want to be better. The implication hangs in the air between us, you don't. So that's it, 5 years together, and you're trading me in for someone who looks better on your partnership application." Derek's expression hardens. "That's not fair. This is about finding someone who shares my vision, who can be a real partner in building something significant. Amanda has connections I need, and she understands the sacrifice it takes to really succeed. And I don't. Sophia, when was the last time you brought a valuable connection to one of my deals? When did your forensic accounting work ever open doors for me? He shakes his head. I need someone who adds value to my career, not just exists alongside it. The words land like physical blows, each one precisely aimed at insecurities I didn't even realize I was carrying. I think about all the times I've analyzed Derek's case studies, caught errors that could have cost him deals, provided insights that he later presented as his own. But apparently, that doesn't count as adding value. I want you out by the end of the month, Derek continues. Amanda's moving in after that, and Sophia? He pauses at the doorway. Don't make this messy. My firm values stability and discretion. I can't have any drama affecting my reputation. After he leaves, I sit in my home office, surrounded by the financial documents that represent my life's work, and feel smaller than I have since I was 12 years old, watching my father get rejected for yet another engineering position because his accent was too thick, his credentials too foreign. But there's something else underneath the humiliation and hurt, something that feels like recognition, like a long dormant part of me finally waking up. Derek thinks I just find problems in other people's books. He has no idea what I actually do, what I'm actually capable of. None of them do. Maybe it's time they found out. The divorce papers arrive on a Thursday morning via courier, professionally prepared and efficiently brutal. Derek wants a clean, quick dissolution with minimal asset division. The apartment goes to him. Apparently, Amanda has strong opinions about the kitchen layout. I get my car, my personal savings, and exactly 60 days to transition to a new living situation. I'm sitting in Morrison and Associates' break room, staring at the papers over my coffee, when my colleague James Rodriguez slides into the chair across from me. You look like someone just told you the IRS is auditing your entire family, he says. James is one of the few people at the firm who actually understands what our work entails. He came to forensic accounting from corporate law, and he has an uncanny ability to read people's stress levels. Derek's divorcing me, I say without looking up. Apparently, I don't add enough value to his professional trajectory. James is quiet for a long moment. Derek's the investment banker, right? Princeton guy with the expensive haircuts. I nod. And he thinks forensic accounting isn't valuable? James leans back in his chair. Sophia, you literally saved Meridian Industries from bankruptcy last year. You identified the embezzlement scheme that was bleeding them dry and helped them recover $8 million. Their entire pension fund would have been gone if you hadn't caught that. That's different, I say, echoing Derek's dismissive tone from the night before. That's just finding problems. Finding problems? James's voice rises slightly. You traced money through 14 shell companies across 3 countries. You rebuilt their entire financial structure from the ground up. Half the companies in the city would fold overnight if they didn't have people like you making sure their books are clean. I look at him properly for the first time. James is about 40, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He's been doing this work for 15 years, and I've always respected his judgment. But I've never thought of my work the way he's describing it. Derek says Amanda understands the demands of high-level finance in a way I don't. Amanda, James frowns. Let me guess, MBA from somewhere impressive, works at a big firm, looks good in business magazines. Harvard, and yes, she's on track for managing director. James is quiet for a moment, then pulls out his phone. What's Derek's firm again? Hartfield and Associates, why? James types something, scrolls for a minute, then shows me his screen. It's a news article from 3 weeks ago. SEC investigating Hartfield and Associates for potential client fund mismanagement. My blood goes cold. I haven't seen this. It's been kept pretty quiet. Apparently, there are questions about how they've been handling some of their high net worth accounts. Irregularities in reporting, potential conflicts of interest. James puts his phone down. Your husband's perfect Harvard MBA girlfriend might not be as valuable as he thinks if her firm is about to get hit with federal sanctions. I stare at the break room table, my mind racing. This is exactly the kind of case Morrison and Associates handles, untangling financial irregularities, helping companies navigate SEC investigations, rebuilding systems after regulatory disasters. Sophia, James says quietly, what you do matters. You help people rebuild after everything falls apart. That's not just finding problems, that's creating solutions when everything seems hopeless. That afternoon, I'm back at my desk, trying to focus on a routine audit when my supervisor, Catherine Morrison, appears at my cubicle. Catherine is in her 50s, sharp as a tack, and she built this firm from the ground up after leaving Big Four accounting to focus on forensic work. Sophia, do you have a minute? I follow her to her office, which has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Catherine gestures for me to sit, then settles behind her desk with the focused attention she brings to complex cases. I've been reviewing your work on the Meridian Industries case, she begins, and the Patterson manufacturing investigation and the Cromwell Holdings restructure. Your track record is exceptional. I wait, unsure where this is going. I'm considering you for the senior investigator position that opened up when Michael transferred to our West Coast office. Catherine leans forward slightly. It would mean a significant salary increase, equity in the firm, and you'd be leading our most complex cases. But more importantly, it would put you in charge of training our junior analysts and developing our investigative methodologies. The words don't sink in immediately. Senior investigator is a position I've dreamed about but never thought I was ready for. Catherine, I'm flattered, but... Let me finish. Her voice is firm but kind. Sophia, you have an instinct for this work that can't be taught. You see patterns that other people miss, and you have the patience to follow money trails that would frustrate most investigators. But more than that, you understand the human element. You know that behind every financial irregularity is a story about people making choices, good and bad. She pulls out a thick folder and places it on the desk between us. I want you to look at something. This is a potential case that came to us last week. A mid-sized investment firm that's been flagged by the SEC for irregularities in their client fund management. The preliminary investigation suggests systematic issues with their reporting structures and possible conflicts of interest. My hands are shaking slightly as I open the folder. The letterhead reads, Hartfield and Associates. The interesting thing is, Catherine continues, they haven't been charged with anything yet. This could be a routine audit that identifies minor compliance issues, or it could be something much bigger. But either way, they're going to need forensic accounting support to navigate the investigation and rebuild their compliance systems. I stare at Derek's firm's financial statements, and suddenly everything looks different. The quarterly reports I used to glance at when Derek brought work home, I'm seeing patterns now that I didn't notice before. Irregularities in their client fund allocations, reporting structures that don't quite align with regulatory requirements. If you take the senior investigator position, Catherine says quietly, this would likely be your first major case. Leading a team of 3 analysts, working directly with federal regulators, helping a firm navigate a potentially career-ending investigation. I look up at her. Catherine, there's something you should know. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, works at Hartfield. Catherine's expression doesn't change. I know. You know. Sophia, I've been doing this work for 25 years. I always research potential conflicts of interest before offering someone a position like this. She leans back in her chair. The question is, are you professional enough to handle a case involving your ex-husband's firm objectively? The weight of the moment settles on me. This isn't just about my career. It's about proving to myself and everyone else what I'm actually capable of. Yes, I say, and my voice is steadier than I feel. I can handle it. Catherine smiles. Good, because Derek Chen's going to need all the help he can get. And frankly, you're probably the best chance his firm has of coming through this investigation with their reputation intact. Over the next 2 weeks, I throw myself into preparing for the Hartfield case while navigating the emotional minefield of divorce proceedings. Derek's lawyer sends increasingly demanding emails about property division and timeline requirements, while Derek himself seems determined to pretend I don't exist. The few times we have to speak, about logistics, about scheduling movers, he treats me with the polite detachment he'd show a service provider. Amanda has apparently moved into our apartment already, and Derek mentions in passing that she's been incredibly helpful in organizing his files and preparing for some big client presentation. She has such a strategic mind, he says as I'm packing my books, really understands how to position things for maximum impact. I nod and continue packing, but something cold and focused is building in my chest. Strategic mind. I think about Amanda's resume, her Harvard MBA, her apparent understanding of high-level finance. I wonder if her strategic mind has noticed the irregularities in Hartfield's client fund reporting that became obvious to me after 10 minutes of reviewing their documents. I move into a small studio apartment in a converted warehouse building downtown. It's not glamorous, but it's mine, and from my window I can see the city spreading out in all directions, full of possibilities I'm only just beginning to imagine. James helps me move, and afterward we sit on my fire escape sharing Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. "So what's your plan?" he asks. I consider the question. 6 months ago, my plan was to be Derek's wife, to support his ambitions, to maybe have kids in a few years once his career stabilized. Now I'm 31, single, and about to lead the most complex investigation of my career. I'm going to be really, really good at my job, I say finally, and I'm going to help Hartfield navigate this SEC investigation professionally and thoroughly, regardless of any personal history. James raises his wine glass, to being really, really good at your job. But as we clink glasses, I'm thinking about something else. Derek doesn't believe I add value. He thinks forensic accounting is just finding problems rather than creating solutions. He has no idea that in 2 weeks, I'll be the person standing between his firm and potential federal charges. And Amanda, with her strategic mind and Harvard MBA, is about to find out exactly what high-level finance looks like when everything starts falling apart. The Hartfield and Associates conference room is exactly what I expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20, and the kind of aggressive modern art that's supposed to convey innovation and success. I arrive with my team, James, our junior analyst Marcus Kim, who graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, and Alina Vasquez, a former federal investigator who joined Morrison 6 months ago specifically to work complex regulatory cases. Derek is there, of course, sitting next to Amanda and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. His managing partner, Richard Hartfield, is a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that comes from 40 years of high-stakes deal-making. Amanda looks exactly like I expected, polished, confident, and completely unprepared for what's coming. "Thank you for coming," Richard says as we settle around the table. "As you know, we've been contacted by the SEC regarding some questions about our client fund management practices. We're confident this is routine compliance review, but we want to be proactive about addressing any concerns." I open my tablet and pull up the preliminary analysis we've prepared. "Mr. Hartfield, based on our initial review of your filings, this investigation isn't routine. The SEC has identified specific irregularities in your client fund reporting that suggest systematic compliance issues." Derek shifts uncomfortably. "Sophia, I think you might be overstating." "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" I ask pleasantly. "I'm Sophia Castellanos, senior investigator with Morrison and Associates. I'll be leading this engagement." The silence that follows is deafening. Derek's face goes through several colors, and Amanda is staring at me with an expression I can't quite read. Richard clears his throat. "Ms. Castellanos, are there any conflicts of interest we should be aware of?" "I was married to Derek Chen until recently," I say matter-of-factly. "Morrison and Associates has protocols for managing potential conflicts, and I can assure you this engagement will be handled with complete professional objectivity. If you'd prefer to work with a different firm, I completely understand." Richard exchanges glances with his other partners. "No, Morrison and Associates has an excellent reputation. We're comfortable proceeding." I nod and continue. "Alina, would you walk them through what we found in the preliminary review?" Alina, who spent 8 years as an SEC investigator before joining our firm, pulls up a presentation that makes Derek and Amanda both go pale. "Your client fund allocation reports show several red flags," Alina begins. "First, there are discrepancies between the returns you've reported to clients and the actual performance of their underlying investments. Second, your fee structures appear to violate several fiduciary duty requirements. Third, there's evidence that client funds may have been used to cover operational expenses during periods of cash flow difficulty. That's impossible, Amanda interjects. I've reviewed all of our compliance procedures personally. Elena gives her a look that I recognize from her federal investigator days. Ms. Worthington, when did you last conduct a comprehensive audit of client fund segregation practices? We conduct quarterly reviews. Of reporting, yes. But when did you last trace actual fund movements to verify that client assets are properly segregated from operational accounts? Amanda's confident expression wavers slightly. That level of detailed review isn't typically. It's required by federal regulation, Elena says quietly. And based on what we've found, your client funds have been used to cover operational expenses on at least 6 occasions over the past 18 months. The room goes dead silent. Using client funds for operational expenses isn't just a compliance violation, it's potential fraud. Richard's voice is carefully controlled when he speaks. How serious is this situation? I take over. That depends on several factors. Intent matters. Were these transfers accidental bookkeeping errors or deliberate misappropriation? Timeline matters. How quickly you identify and correct the issues affects potential penalties. Cooperation matters. How thoroughly you work with investigators affects whether this becomes a civil matter or a criminal one. Criminal, Derek's voice cracks slightly. Derek, I say, and my voice is professional but not unkind. Financial irregularities of this magnitude can result in federal charges if they're found to be intentional. But right now, we're in information gathering mode. The goal is to understand what happened and develop a plan to correct it. Amanda leans forward. What kind of plan? Marcus, our junior analyst, pulls up a detailed timeline. We need to trace every client fund transaction for the past 3 years, identify all instances where client assets were improperly used, calculate exact amounts owed to each affected client with interest, develop new compliance procedures to prevent future violations, and prepare comprehensive documentation for the SEC. How long will this take? Richard asks. 4 to 6 months if we have full cooperation, I reply. Longer if we encounter resistance or incomplete records. And what are we looking at in terms of penalties? Elena and I exchange glances. Best case scenario, full restitution to affected clients, enhanced compliance monitoring, and significant civil penalties. Worst case, criminal charges, firm dissolution, and individual liability for partners. Derek looks like he might be sick. Amanda's perfect composure is starting to crack around the edges. There is one other issue, I continue. We found evidence that some of these irregularities were concealed in quarterly reports to clients. That suggests knowledge of the violations, which could affect determinations of intent. What kind of evidence? Amanda asks. James pulls up a series of documents on the conference room screen. These are client statements from the third quarter of last year. They show investment returns that don't match the actual performance of the underlying assets. Someone adjusted the numbers to hide the fact that client funds had been used to cover a cash flow shortfall. Amanda stares at the screen, and I can see the moment she realizes what she's looking at. I prepared those reports. Under whose direction? Elena asks gently. Amanda glances around the room, and I can see her strategic Harvard-trained mind working through the implications. She's realizing that someone gave her false information to include in official client communications, which makes her potentially liable for securities fraud. I need to speak with my attorney, she says quietly. Richard nods grimly. We all do. After they leave to consult with legal counsel, my team gathers in an empty conference room to debrief. That was intense, Marcus says. Did you see Derek's face when we started talking about criminal liability? This is a serious situation, Elena reminds him. These people's careers are on the line, maybe their freedom. I'm staring out the conference room windows at the city below, thinking about Derek's words from 6 months ago. You're good at finding problems in other people's books, but that's not the same as creating value. Sophia, James's voice brings me back to the present. You okay? I'm fine, just thinking about next steps. I turn back to the group. This investigation is going to be thorough and professional. We're not here to destroy anyone's career. We're here to find the truth and help them fix whatever went wrong. Even Derek, Marcus asks. He knows about the divorce and there's curiosity in his voice. Especially Derek, I say firmly. This is about professional integrity, not personal revenge. If we do our job right, Hartfield has a chance to survive this. If we let personal feelings interfere, everyone loses. But as I say the words, I'm thinking about the months ahead. About Derek having to depend on my expertise to save his career. About Amanda discovering that her strategic mind missed regulatory requirements that could send her to prison. About the irony that the wife Derek discarded for not adding enough value is now the only thing standing between him and professional ruin. It's not revenge I'm feeling, it's something more complex than that. Something that feels like finally being seen for who I really am, what I'm really capable of. Over the next 6 weeks, the investigation consumes my life in the best possible way. I'm working 12-hour days, but every hour feels purposeful. We're uncovering a pattern of financial mismanagement that goes back 3 years, and each discovery brings us closer to understanding how a respected firm lost track of millions in client assets. The human dynamics are fascinating and heartbreaking. Richard Hartfield built his firm over 30 years and is watching his legacy crumble. Some of the junior partners are cooperating fully, desperate to save their careers. Others are lawyering up and preparing to blame everything on their colleagues. And Derek is caught in the middle, realizing that his Princeton connections and natural charisma mean nothing when federal investigators want to see documentation of every decision he's made for the past 3 years. Sophia, I need to ask you something. Derek approaches me after one of our weekly progress meetings. He looks exhausted, older than his 32 years. What is it? How bad is this really? I know you have to be professional in the meetings, but off the record, what are we looking at? I consider the question carefully. We're standing in the hallway outside the conference room, and I can see Amanda through the glass doors, hunched over a laptop with her attorney. Derek, I can't give you legal advice, and I can't discuss details of an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you that cooperation matters. Honesty matters. Taking responsibility matters. He nods, then looks at me with something that might be regret. Sophia, I know things ended badly between us. I know I said some things that were unfair. Derek. No, let me finish. Watching you work these past few weeks, seeing how you handle complex situations, how the federal investigators respect your analysis, I think I didn't understand what you do, what you're capable of. The apology I've been waiting for, and it feels smaller than I expected. Not unimportant, but not life-changing either. I appreciate that, I say. But right now, I need you to focus on helping us understand what happened at your firm. Your career depends on it. Our careers, Derek says quietly. Mine and Amanda's. She's not handling this well. She keeps saying she was set up, that someone fed her false information for those client reports. I think about Amanda's perfect confidence 6 months ago, her strategic mind that was supposed to complement Derek's ambitions so beautifully. What do you think happened? Derek is quiet for a long moment. I think we all got so focused on growth, on hitting our targets, that we stopped paying attention to the details that actually matter. Amanda's brilliant at big-picture strategy, but she's not. She doesn't have your instinct for where problems might be hiding. Your instinct. 6 months ago, he called it a weird gift that wasn't as valuable as Amanda's Harvard MBA and partnership track ambitions. Derek, you and Amanda are going to be fine if you cooperate with the investigation and take responsibility for any mistakes you made. But you need to stop thinking about this as something that happened to you and start thinking about it as something you participated in. He nods, but I can see the wheels turning. Derek has always been good at positioning things for maximum personal advantage, and he's trying to figure out how to do that now. 2 weeks later, Alina brings me a discovery that changes everything. Sophia, you need to see this. Alina's voice has the controlled excitement I've learned to associate with major breakthroughs. She's standing in my office doorway with a thick folder and the expression of someone who's just solved a puzzle that's been frustrating her for weeks. I gesture for her to sit down. What did you find? Remember how Amanda kept insisting someone gave her false information for those client reports? She wasn't lying. Alina spreads a series of documents across my desk. Look at these internal emails. I scan the correspondence quickly, and my blood pressure spikes. The emails show a clear pattern. Derek providing Amanda with adjusted figures for client statements, always with explanations about accounting corrections or timing adjustments. But when I cross-reference them with the actual fund performance data, it's obvious the numbers were deliberately altered to hide shortfalls. Alina, this shows Derek knew about the fund misuse and actively concealed it. It gets worse. She pulls out another set of documents. These are Derek's personal account statements. Look at the dates when client funds were transferred to operational accounts. I study the timeline and feel sick. Every instance of client fund misuse corresponds with Derek making significant personal investments, stock purchases, bond acquisitions, even the down payment on a vacation home in the Hamptons that he bought last summer. He was using client money to fund his personal investments. Not directly, but he was using client funds to keep the firm operational while he diverted his own capital to personal investments. Technically, it's still misappropriation, but the pattern suggests deliberate planning rather than cash flow emergencies. I stare at the documents, thinking about Derek's dismissive attitude toward my little forensic accounting projects. He had no idea that those projects involved exactly this kind of investigation, tracing money through complex schemes designed by people who thought they were too smart to get caught. Alina, we need to document this carefully and present it to the federal investigators. This changes Derek's liability significantly. And Amanda's. I consider the question. Amanda was negligent in not verifying the information she put in client reports. But if she was genuinely unaware of the fund misuse, her liability is much less serious than Derek's. That's going to be a hard conversation. 3 days later, I'm sitting across from Derek and his attorney in a small conference room at Morrison and Associates. Derek looks like he hasn't slept in weeks, and his attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s named Patricia Williams, has the grim expression of someone preparing for bad news. Derek, we found evidence that you were aware of the client fund transfers and actively concealed them in quarterly reports. I begin. We have documentation showing that you provided false information to Amanda for client communications. Derek's face goes white. Sophia, I can explain. Derek, don't say anything else. Patricia's voice is sharp. Ms. Castellanos, what exactly are you alleging? Alina slides a folder across the table. We're not alleging anything. We're presenting documentation that shows a pattern of deliberate misrepresentation to both clients and regulatory authorities. Patricia reviews the documents quickly, and I can see her calculating the implications. This is evidence of securities fraud. Among other things, yes, I reply. The good news is that we've also found evidence that suggests Amanda Worthington was not aware of the fund transfers when she prepared the client reports. She was given false information by Derek, which significantly reduces her liability. Derek slumps in his chair. Sophia, I never meant for this to get so complicated. The firm was having cash flow issues, and I thought I could replace the funds before anyone noticed. It was supposed to be temporary. Derek, you used client money to maintain your personal investment portfolio while your firm struggled with operational expenses, Alina says quietly. That's not a cash flow solution, that's fraud. Patricia closes the folder and looks directly at me. Ms. Castellanos, what are you recommending to the federal investigators? This is the moment I've been dreading and anticipating for weeks. The moment when my professional integrity determines the trajectory of Derek's life. We're recommending full cooperation with the SEC investigation, complete restitution to affected clients with interest and penalties, Derek's resignation from any positions involving client fund management, enhanced compliance monitoring for the firm, and we're recommending that the prosecutors consider Derek's cooperation when determining whether to pursue criminal charges. And if Derek cooperates fully, if Derek provides complete documentation, testifies truthfully, and takes responsibility for his actions, the prosecutors might consider a plea agreement that avoids prison time. But he'll never work in financial services again. Derek looks at me with an expression I've never seen before, genuine fear mixed with something that might be respect. Sophia, I know I have no right to ask this, but you're the only person who really understands what happened here. Will you help me figure out how to make this right? 6 months ago, this man told me I didn't add enough value to his professional aspirations. Now he's asking me to save his career and possibly his freedom. The irony is not lost on me. Derek, I'll make sure our report to the investigators is accurate and complete. That's the best I can do for anyone involved in this situation. But as I say the words, I'm thinking about Amanda, who's about to discover that her strategic mind and Harvard MBA couldn't protect her from Derek's lies. About Richard Hartfield, who built his firm over 30 years and is watching it collapse because he trusted the wrong people. About the clients whose retirement funds were used to subsidize Derek's investment portfolio. This isn't about revenge, it's about consequences. The next few weeks pass in a blur of federal interviews, document preparation, and media management. The SEC investigation becomes public when a financial journalist breaks the story, and suddenly Hartfield and Associates is headline news. Investment firm under federal investigation for client fund misuse. SEC probes potential fraud at mid-sized financial firm. Harvard MBA caught in federal securities investigation. I watch Derek's world unravel from a professional distance. He's cooperating with investigators, but the damage to his reputation is irreversible. Amanda has been placed on administrative leave from the firm and is reportedly considering a career change. Richard Hartfield announced his retirement and is selling his ownership stake to pay for client restitution. But there's something else happening that I didn't expect. Morrison and Associates is getting calls from other firms, other clients, other investigators who want to work with the team that untangled the Hartfield case. Catherine promotes me to partner 6 months ahead of schedule, and suddenly I'm fielding job offers from firms I never dreamed would notice my work. Sophia, you've become something of a celebrity in forensic accounting circles, Catherine tells me during our weekly check-in. The Hartfield case is going to be studied in business schools as an example of how proper investigation can save firms from complete destruction. How so? Because of your work, Hartfield is going to survive. They'll pay significant penalties and operate under federal monitoring for 3 years, but they'll survive. Without proper forensic analysis, the entire firm would have collapsed and taken down dozens of other companies that depend on their services. I think about this as I walk home to my studio apartment that evening. 6 months ago, Derek told me I was good at finding problems but not at creating value. But the truth is, the work I do, the work I've always done, creates value by preventing catastrophic failures, by helping people rebuild after disasters, by ensuring that financial systems work the way they're supposed to work. That's not a small thing, that's not a lesser thing, that's essential. 3 months later, I get a call that changes everything. Ms. Castellanos, this is Jonathan Mitchell from Hamilton Equity Partners. We're a private equity firm specializing in corporate restructuring, and we've been following your work on the Hartfield investigation. We'd like to discuss a position with our firm. Hamilton Equity Partners. I know the name. They're one of the most prestigious restructuring firms in the country, the kind of place where senior partners make 7 figures and have their analyses quoted in the Wall Street Journal. What kind of position? We want to create a new role, Director of Forensic Analysis. You'd lead a team of investigators working on our most complex restructuring cases, companies that are facing federal investigation, regulatory action, or systematic fraud. The work would be similar to what you do now, but the scale would be much larger. The salary he mentions is 3 times what I make at Morrison and Associates. The equity package would make me wealthy within 5 years. But more than that, it's recognition that the work I do, the work I've always done, is valuable at the highest levels of finance. Mr. Mitchell, I'm very interested. When would you like to discuss this further? Are you available for dinner tonight? I'm in town specifically to meet with you. That evening, I find myself at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, sitting across from a man who runs a firm that manages billions in assets, and he's asking for my advice on complex financial investigations. The truth is, Sophia, may I call you Sophia? Forensic analysis is becoming critical to everything we do. Regulatory scrutiny is increasing, fraud schemes are becoming more sophisticated, and we need people who can see patterns that others miss. What would I be working on? Our biggest cases: companies with hundreds of millions in revenue that are facing existential threats, federal investigations that could shut down entire industries, complex frauds that span multiple countries and regulatory jurisdictions. Jonathan leans forward slightly. You'd have a team of 12 analysts, unlimited resources, and direct access to federal investigators and regulatory authorities. I think about Derek's dismissive words about my little forensic accounting projects. The cases Jonathan is describing aren't little. They're the kind of high stakes, complex investigations that determine the fate of thousands of jobs and billions in assets. Jonathan, I'm very interested, but I need to ask, why me? There are forensic accountants with more experience, bigger profiles. Jonathan smiles, because we don't just need someone with experience, we need someone with instinct, someone who can see what others miss. The Hartfield case proved you have that instinct. What do you mean? You identified systematic fraud that 3 other accounting firms missed during their routine audits. You traced money through complex schemes that had fooled federal regulators for 3 years, and you did it while maintaining complete professional objectivity, even though you had personal history with the people involved. Jonathan pauses. That's not just technical skill, that's exceptional judgment. As I walk home that night, my mind is spinning. A year ago, I was the supportive wife who handled logistics while Derek pursued his ambitions. Now I'm being recruited by one of the most prestigious firms in the country to lead investigations that will make international headlines. But there's one more conversation I need to have before I can move forward. 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in a coffee shop near Derek's new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood that's significantly less prestigious than where we used to live together. He looks different. Thinner, older, wearing off-the-rack clothes instead of his usual designer suits. The federal investigation ended with a plea agreement that kept him out of prison, but banned him from working in financial services for life. Thank you for meeting me, Derek says as he sits down across from me. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I almost didn't, I admit, but I think we both need closure. Derek nods and stares at his coffee for a moment. Sophia, I need to apologize, not just for the divorce, but for everything. The way I talked about your work, the way I dismissed what you do, the way I made you feel like you weren't enough. Derek, please let me finish. He looks up at me, and I can see genuine remorse in his eyes. I spent so much time thinking about status and prestige and career advancement that I forgot what actually matters. You saved my firm, Sophia. You saved my career, what was left of it, and you probably saved me from going to prison. And you did it professionally, objectively, even though I had hurt you. I consider his words carefully. Derek, what you did at Hartfield wasn't about our marriage or our divorce. You made those choices because you lost sight of your professional ethics. But the way I treated you, the things I said about your work not being valuable, Derek shakes his head. I was so wrong, Sophia. What you do is incredibly valuable. You help people rebuild when everything falls apart. You find truth in situations where everyone else is lost. I appreciate the apology, I say, and I mean it. But Derek, I didn't figure out my worth because you finally recognized it. I figured it out by doing work that mattered, regardless of whether you or anyone else understood it. Derek is quiet for a moment. What happens now? For you, I mean, I heard Catherine Morrison made you a partner. I think about the offer from Hamilton Equity Partners, about the life I'm building that has nothing to do with being anyone's wife or supporting anyone else's ambitions. I'm doing well, I say simply. I'm doing work I love with people who respect what I bring to it. And personally, are you seeing anyone? The question catches me off guard, partly because I haven't thought about dating in months. My life has been consumed by the investigation, by my growing career, by discovering what I'm capable of when I'm not trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. Derek, I'm focused on my career right now. I'm finally doing work that uses all of my abilities, and I don't want to complicate that by trying to be what someone else needs me to be. Derek nods. You should know that Amanda and we didn't work out. Turns out a crisis reveals who people really are, and we weren't who we thought we were together. I feel a flicker of sympathy for both of them. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Are you? The question hangs between us, and I realize I am sorry. Not because I want Derek back, but because I know what it feels like to have your vision of the future collapse, to discover that the person you thought you loved doesn't really exist. Yes, I am sorry. Heartbreak is difficult, regardless of the circumstances. Derek looks at me with something that might be wonder. You're different, Sophia, stronger, more confident. I'm the same person I always was. I just stopped apologizing for it. We talk for another hour about practical things, finalizing the divorce, dividing the last of our shared assets, what Derek's going to do now that his finance career is over. He's thinking about teaching, maybe getting a graduate degree in something completely different. Starting over at 33 is terrifying, but he seems oddly relieved to be free from the constant pressure to climb higher, earn more, impress the right people. As we're getting ready to leave, Derek hesitates. Sophia, can I ask you something? Do you think you could ever forgive me? Not for us to get back together. I know that's not going to happen, but for your own peace of mind. I consider the question seriously. 6 months ago, Derek's betrayal felt like the end of my world. Now it feels like the beginning of something better. Derek, I forgave you weeks ago. Not because you deserved it, but because holding on to anger was taking energy I needed for other things. Other things. I think about the Hamilton Equity Partners offer, about the cases I'll be investigating, about the team I'll be building. My life, I say simply, the life I'm building that has nothing to do with who I used to be married to. A month later, I'm standing in Hamilton Equity Partners' Manhattan office, looking out at a view of Central Park from the 42nd floor. My new office has twice the square footage of my apartment, and my assistant is coordinating meetings with federal investigators and Fortune 500 CEOs. But the real difference isn't the prestige or the salary, it's the recognition that what I do matters at the highest levels. I'm not finding problems in other people's books. I'm preventing catastrophic failures that would destroy thousands of jobs and billions in assets. I'm helping companies rebuild after fraud nearly destroys them. I'm ensuring that financial systems work the way they're supposed to work. Catherine Morrison throws me a going-away party at Morrison and Associates, and half the forensic accounting community shows up. James gives a toast that makes me tear up. Sophia has always had a gift for seeing patterns that others miss, he says. But more than that, she has the integrity to follow those patterns wherever they lead, regardless of personal cost. She's going to do incredible work at Hamilton Equity, but more importantly, she's going to help a lot of people along the way. Elena pulls me aside as the party is winding down. Are you nervous? Terrified, I admit, but also excited. This feels like what I was supposed to be doing all along. What about dating, meeting someone new? I laugh. Elena, 6 months ago I was married to someone who thought my career was a cute hobby. Now I'm running forensic analysis for one of the most prestigious firms in the country. I'm not in a hurry to complicate that by trying to fit into someone else's life. What if you met someone who wanted to fit into yours? The question stays with me as I walk home through the city. For the first time in my adult life, I have a clear sense of who I am and what I want. I'm not looking to complete someone else or be completed by them. I'm not trying to be the perfect supportive partner for someone else's ambitions. But maybe, eventually, I might meet someone who sees what I see in myself. Someone who recognizes that forensic accounting isn't just finding problems, it's creating solutions when everything seems hopeless. Someone who understands that the work I do matters, not because it's prestigious or glamorous, but because it helps people rebuild when their world falls apart. Someone who knows that strength isn't something you find in another person. It's something you discover in yourself when you stop apologizing for who you are. 3 months into my new role at Hamilton Equity Partners, I get an unexpected invitation. The envelope is thick, expensive cardstock with gold embossing. Inside is an invitation to the annual Financial Services Leadership Gala, the kind of high-profile charity event where the city's most powerful people gather to network and be photographed for Society magazines. What makes this invitation significant isn't the event itself, but who it's from. Richard Hartfield, Derek's former boss and the founder of the firm I investigated. The firm that survived federal investigation because of my work. Ms. Castellanos, the handwritten note reads, I would be honored if you would attend as my guest. There are some people I would like you to meet, and frankly, I think the financial community needs to understand the value of the work you do. I hope you'll consider it. Richard. I stare at the invitation for a long moment. This is the event Derek used to attend every year, where he'd network with potential clients and try to impress the managing partners. The event where he met Amanda, where they bonded over their shared ambitions and Harvard connections. The event where, according to the society pages, Derek and Amanda made their debut as a couple last year, just weeks after our divorce was finalized. Elena finds me in my office, still holding the invitation. What's that? I show her the invitation and Richard's note. Are you going to go? I don't know, it feels like a lot, facing that whole world again, but from a completely different position. Elena sits down across from my desk. Sophia, you've rebuilt your entire life. You're doing work you love, making more money than you ever dreamed of, and you're respected by some of the most powerful people in finance. Why wouldn't you want to celebrate that? Because part of me is still the woman who felt invisible at Derek's work events, who smiled and nodded while people talked around her like she wasn't there. But you're not that woman anymore. Elena's right, but it's still terrifying. The thought of walking into that room, seeing Derek and Amanda, facing all those people who watched my marriage fall apart and probably assumed I was just another casualty of an ambitious man's rise. That night, I call my father. Mija, he says when I explain the situation, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were afraid to try something new? I smile. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. And what needs to be done here? I think about the question. I need to show up as who I really am, not who I used to be. Then you have your answer. 2 weeks later, I'm standing in front of my full-length mirror, wearing a midnight blue silk dress that cost more than I used to spend on clothes in 6 months. It's elegant, sophisticated, and most importantly, it makes me feel powerful rather than trying to please anyone else. My phone buzzes with a text from James. Knock them dead, partner. Show them what forensic accounting really looks like. Another from Elena. Remember, you're not the same person who used to feel invisible at these things. You're Sophia Castellanos, and you're going to change how people think about financial investigation. And one from Catherine Morrison. Proud of you, Sophia. Show them what we taught you. As I'm getting ready to leave, my doorbell rings. I open it to find a man in a beautifully tailored suit holding a small bouquet of white orchids. Ms. Castellanos, I'm David Chen, no relation to your ex-husband, he adds with a slight smile. Richard Hartfield asked me to escort you to the gala tonight, if that's acceptable to you. I study him for a moment. David Chen is probably in his late 30s, with kind eyes and the kind of presence that suggests confidence without arrogance. He's Asian American, impeccably dressed, and there's something about his manner that puts me immediately at ease. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't need an escort. Of course you don't, he says gently. But Richard thought you might prefer to arrive with someone, given that this might be an emotionally complex evening. I'm a partner at Chen and Associates. We handle legal work for Hamilton Equity Partners. We've never met, but I've heard excellent things about your work. Something in his tone makes me reconsider. This isn't about needing protection or support. It's about making a statement. About walking into that room as an equal, not as Derek's discarded ex-wife. Mr. Chen. David, please. David, I'll accept your offer. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not looking for a romantic partner. I'm focused on my career right now. David's smile is warm and genuine. Sophia, I'm gay. My husband Marcus is a pediatric surgeon at Mount Sinai. I'm here as your colleague and friend, nothing more. I feel my shoulders relax. In that case, I'd be honored to arrive with you. The ride to the gala gives me time to learn more about David. He's been a corporate attorney for 15 years, specializes in financial services law, and has handled several high-profile cases involving forensic accounting. I actually reviewed your work on the Hartfield case for a legal journal article, he tells me as our car pulls up to the hotel. Your analysis was brilliant, comprehensive, objective, and it prevented a catastrophic collapse that would have affected dozens of other firms. Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone who understands the legal implications. David turns to face me as the valet opens our door. Sophia, there's something you should know about tonight. Derek and Amanda will be here, but they're not the people to watch. The real power players, the managing partners, the federal regulators, the people who actually shape policy, they know who you are and what you've accomplished. Tonight is about them getting to meet you in person. As we walk into the ballroom, I feel something I haven't experienced in years. Complete confidence in who I am and what I bring to any room I enter. The ballroom is exactly what I expected. Crystal chandeliers, flowers that probably cost more than most people's rent, and several hundred of the most powerful people in finance networking over champagne and carefully crafted conversation. But something is different this time. Instead of feeling invisible, I notice people noticing me. Instead of conversations stopping when I approach, I see recognition in their eyes. Richard Hartfield appears at my side within minutes. Sophia, you look magnificent. Thank you for coming. He turns to David. I see you found each other successfully. Richard, thank you for the invitation and for the introduction to David. Richard's expression grows serious. Sophia, I need you to know something. What you did for my firm, the way you handled the investigation with integrity and professionalism, it saved more than just our business. It saved the retirement funds of our clients, the jobs of our employees, and frankly, it saved my reputation. Richard, I was just doing my job. No, he says firmly. You were doing your job exceptionally well, under circumstances that would have compromised most people's judgment. That matters in this industry. Over the next hour, Richard introduces me to a steady stream of managing partners, federal regulators, and senior executives. Each conversation follows a similar pattern. They know my work, they're impressed by the Hartfield case, and they want to understand how forensic accounting can help them prevent similar disasters. Ms. Castellanos, says a woman in her 50s who turns out to be a senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, I've been following your career with interest. We handle white-collar defense cases, and we're always looking for forensic accountants who can untangle complex fraud schemes. The regulatory environment is changing rapidly, adds a federal investigator who specializes in securities fraud. We need people who understand both the technical aspects of financial analysis and the human psychology behind fraud schemes. I'm in the middle of a fascinating conversation about international money laundering when I see them across the room. Derek and Amanda, standing near the bar, looking like they're having an intense, not entirely pleasant conversation. Derek has lost weight and his suit, while still expensive, quite fit the way his clothes used to. Amanda looks polished as always, but there's something brittle around the edges. David notices my attention shift. Do you want to leave? No, I say, surprising myself. I want to stay. I want to finish my conversation with Ms. Patterson about cross-border asset tracing. Because that's what this evening is about. Not facing Derek and Amanda, but celebrating the work I love with people who understand its value. But 20 minutes later, Derek approaches our group during a pause in conversation. Sophia, he says quietly, you look incredible. The group I'm with, two federal regulators, a managing partner from a Big Four accounting firm, and David, falls silent. Everyone in financial services knows about the Hartfield case, and most of them know about my personal connection to it. Derek, I say pleasantly, how are you? I'm managing, teaching some business classes at the community college, doing some consulting work. He glances around at the group I'm with, and I can see him processing the implications. I heard about your new position at Hamilton Equity. Congratulations. Thank you. Derek hesitates, then looks directly at me. Sophia, I don't know if this is the right time or place, but I want you to know that I understand now. What you do, why it matters. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it. One of the federal regulators, a woman named Sarah Martinez, who has been incredibly kind to me this evening, steps slightly forward. Mr. Chen, she says coolly, Ms. Castellanos' work on your firm's case was exemplary. Her analysis prevented a collapse that would have affected thousands of people. The message is clear. Derek is facing someone who is not only professionally successful, but professionally respected by people who matter. I know, Derek says quietly. She saved my career, what was left of it. She saved a lot of careers. The conversation continues for a few more awkward minutes, with Derek clearly recognizing that he's interrupting a professional discussion among people whose work he no longer has access to. When he finally excuses himself, Sarah Martinez turns to me with an expression of respect. Sophia, I've handled a lot of financial investigations, and I've rarely seen someone maintain that level of professionalism under such personal circumstances. That's exceptional judgment. As the evening continues, I find myself in increasingly fascinating conversations. A managing partner from a major investment bank wants to discuss how forensic accounting can identify systemic risks before they become catastrophic. A federal regulator is interested in my thoughts on international cooperation in fraud investigations. A senior partner from a prestigious law firm wants to explore potential collaboration on complex white-collar cases. These aren't networking conversations, they're genuine professional discussions among people who respect each other's expertise. Near the end of the evening, I'm standing near the windows overlooking the city when Amanda approaches. Sophia, her voice is hesitant, uncertain. Could we talk for a moment? I turn to face her, noting that she looks older, more tired than she did 6 months ago. Of course. I want to apologize, Amanda begins, for everything, for the affair, for the things Derek said about your work, for not recognizing what you were capable of. I consider her words carefully. Amanda's apology feels more complex than Derek's. There's genuine regret, but also something that might be professional envy. Amanda, I appreciate the apology, but you should know that I've moved past all of that. I'm focused on my work and my future. I can see that. Amanda glances around the room, taking in the powerful people I've been talking with all evening. Derek and we didn't work out. Turns out crisis reveals people's true character, and we weren't who we thought we were. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Amanda looks at me with something that might be wonder. Are you, really? I think about the question seriously. Amanda, I'm sorry that you and Derek hurt each other. I'm sorry that both of you had to learn hard lessons about professional ethics and personal integrity. But I'm not sorry that I'm no longer part of that situation. Because you're better off without us. Because I'm better when I'm not trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. Amanda nods slowly. I think I'm starting to understand that about myself too. As Amanda walks away, David reappears at my side. How are you doing? Honestly, better than I expected. 6 months ago, seeing Derek and Amanda would have ruined my evening. Tonight, they felt like background noise. That's growth. That's perspective. I know who I am and what I'm worth now, and it has nothing to do with who I used to be married to. David smiles. Speaking of which, there's someone I'd like you to meet. A friend of mine who does work similar to yours but focuses on international cases. He gestures toward a man in his early 40s standing near the bar. He's tall, with dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, and when he turns toward us, I notice he has the kind of focused attention that suggests someone accustomed to solving complex problems. Sophia, I'd like you to meet Dr. Alexander Romano. Alex, this is Sophia Castellanos, the forensic accountant I was telling you about. Alex extends his hand with a warm smile. Ms. Castellanos, I've heard fascinating things about your work on the Hartfield case. I'm a forensic economist with the International Crime Prevention Unit. We investigate financial crimes that cross multiple jurisdictions. Dr. Romano, that sounds incredibly complex. Alex, please, and it is complex, But that's what makes it interesting. I actually reviewed your analysis of the Hartfield fund transfers for a case we're working on involving similar patterns across 3 countries. As Alex and I talk, I realize this is the first conversation I've had with a man in months that feels completely natural. We're discussing work we both love, sharing insights about complex investigations, debating the merits of different analytical approaches. There's no posturing, no attempt to impress or diminish each other. Just two professionals who respect each other's expertise. I have to ask, Alex says at one point, how did you develop such an intuitive understanding of money flow patterns? Your ability to trace funds through complex schemes is really exceptional. I think about my father's Sunday dinner economics lessons, about growing up understanding that every financial decision has consequences that ripple through systems in ways most people never see. I think I learned to see patterns because I grew up understanding that money tells stories about people's choices. Follow the money, and you understand the real motivations behind decisions. Alex's eyes light up. That's exactly right. Most people think forensic analysis is about numbers, but it's really about human psychology. Numbers don't lie, but people do, and they leave traces in the numbers. By the time the evening ends, Alex and I have exchanged business cards and tentative plans to continue our conversation over coffee. Not a date, a professional discussion that might become a collaboration on a complex international case. As David and I ride back toward my apartment, I reflect on the evening. How do you feel? David asks. Proud, I say, surprising myself with the simplicity of the answer. 6 months ago, I would have felt intimidated in that room. Tonight, I felt like I belonged there. Because you do belong there. Your work matters, Sophia. Not just the technical analysis, but the integrity you bring to complex situations. David, can I ask you something? How do you know when you're ready to let someone into your life, professionally or personally? David considers the question thoughtfully. I think you're ready when you're not looking for someone to complete you or validate your worth. When you know who you are and what you want, and you're open to finding someone who complements that rather than complicating it. I think about Alex, about our easy professional conversation, about the way he respected my insights without trying to diminish or explain them. What if you meet someone who sees your work the way you see it, who understands why it matters? David smiles, then you might have found someone worth getting to know better. As I walk up to my apartment building, I think about the year that's passed since Derek asked for a divorce. 12 months ago, I felt like a supporting character in my own life, always adapting to someone else's priorities and ambitions. Tonight, I walked into a room full of the most powerful people in finance, and they knew who I was. They respected my work. They wanted to hear my insights. I'm not the same woman who felt invisible at Derek's work events. I'm Sophia Castellanos, Director of Forensic Analysis at Hamilton Equity Partners, and I help people rebuild when their world falls apart. And for the first time in years, I'm excited about what comes next. The conference room on the 45th floor of Hamilton Equity Partners overlooks the Hudson River, and this morning the view is spectacular. Clear skies, sunlight glinting off the water, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be in New York. But I'm not looking at the view. I'm focused on the presentation screen, where my team is walking federal investigators through our analysis of the most complex international fraud case I've ever worked on. 3 countries, 14 shell companies, and $200 million in misappropriated funds that we've traced through a maze of offshore accounts and cryptocurrency exchanges. The pattern becomes clear when you map the fund transfers against the timeline of regulatory announcements, explains Marcus, my senior analyst who joined the team last year after completing his CPA and forensic accounting certification. Every time a new compliance requirement was announced, funds were moved to avoid detection. Sarah Martinez, the federal investigator who's become both a colleague and a friend over the past 2 years, nods appreciatively. Your analysis makes it possible for us to present a clear narrative to prosecutors. Without this level of detail, we'd have circumstantial evidence at best. After the investigators leave, my team gathers for our weekly debrief. These meetings have become one of my favorite parts of the job. a chance to discuss complex cases with people who understand why this work matters. Any word on the Morrison Industries case? Asks Alina, who joined Hamilton Equity 6 months after I did. Catherine Morrison was sad to lose both of us, but she understood that we needed to grow, and Hamilton's resources allow us to work on cases that Morrison and Associates couldn't handle alone. The SEC is recommending civil penalties rather than criminal charges, I report. Full restitution to affected parties, enhanced compliance monitoring, and 3 new board members with financial oversight experience. But the company survives, and 2,000 jobs are safe. This is what success looks like in forensic accounting, not destroying companies, but helping them navigate crises and emerge stronger on the other side. My assistant knocks on the conference room door. Sophia, Alex Romano is here for your lunch meeting. Alex and I have been working together on international cases for 18 months now, and somewhere along the way, our professional collaboration became a personal relationship. Not the kind of relationship where I adapt myself to fit his life, but the kind where two people who respect each other's work figure out how to build something together without losing themselves in the process. I'll be right there, I tell her, then turn back to my team. Excellent work on the presentation today. Take the rest of the afternoon to decompress. I know this case has been consuming everyone's lives for the past 3 months. I find Alex in my office, studying the wall where I display certificates and recognition from various cases. He's wearing a charcoal suit that brings out the silver in his hair, and when he turns to smile at me, I feel the same flutter of attraction I've felt since we first met 2 years ago. But more than attraction, I feel partnership. Alex understands my work because he does similar work. He challenges my thinking without dismissing my insights. He supports my ambitions without trying to redirect them toward his own needs. Ready for lunch? He asks. I grin and nod, always. We walk out together, side by side but not fused, two people who choose each other while keeping the parts of themselves that matter intact. Over salads and strong coffee, our conversation flows from case strategy to small, ordinary things. Books we've been meaning to read, the best corner bakery for croissants, the way Marcus is obsessed with building perfect pivot tables. It's easy and real. There are no performances, no posturing, just two people who like thinking hard about complicated problems and who happen to like each other, too. After lunch, Alex squeezes my hand as we head back to the office. There's a conference in Amsterdam in the spring, he says. I think we should submit a joint paper, cross-jurisdictional fund tracing in the age of crypto. You in? I laugh, only if you promise to let me do the case studies. A deal. The work that keeps me. The months that follow are the kind that feel full rather than busy. Hamilton's resources let us take on cases that matter, companies with real employees and real communities at stake. My team grows. Marcus becomes a certified forensic accountant and relishes mentoring the new analysts. Alina designs a training program we roll out across the firm so every investigator learns to read the human story inside transaction ledgers. We build partnerships with regulators in Europe and Asia, helping agencies coordinate responses to complex schemes that move faster than laws do. I travel more than I used to. Sometimes the work is exhausting. But fatigue is different when it comes from the right kind of effort, the kind that produces tangible protection for people who trusted their financial advisors and were betrayed. At night, I fall asleep thinking about ledgers and protective covenants and new ways to spot creative bookkeeping. In the morning, I wake up grateful to go back. In aftershocks, not everyone's story turns into a fairy tale. Hartfield and Associates survives under strict monitoring. Several partners take early retirement, and the firm restructures to prioritize transparency. Derek takes adjunct teaching work at a local college and volunteers as a financial literacy instructor at a community center, small ways to give back that he never considered before. He writes me once in a while with updates about a class he's proud of or a student who finally understood discounted cash flow. We remain cordial. Forgiveness has settled into something practical and unshowy. Amanda leaves private practice and starts a compliance consultancy focused on preventing the very mistakes she overlooked. Her career pivots, but in a way that fits her strengths, strategy plus rigorous verification. Once, months after the gala, she sends an email thanking me for the way the investigation forced her to learn deeper methods. I reply, "Good to see you doing the work right." She writes back, "You were right to do it that way. Thank you for holding us to a higher standard." That small exchange means something I couldn't have predicted, an affirmation that consequence can be a teacher. The things that stay. Dad comes to a few of my speaking events. Whenever I introduce him on stage, Miguel Castellanos, the economist of our Sunday tables, he laughs and waves like someone used to being humble and suddenly in the spotlight. He keeps a photo on his bedside table from the day I became partner at Morrison and another from my first week at Hamilton. "I told you," he says, pointing at each one with a proud, crabby grin. "You were always seeing the angles nobody else did." He calls me the night I accept a seat on a new advisory board for an international anti-fraud coalition. "You make your mother and me proud," he says simply. My mother, who never stopped believing that schooling and grit were the equalizers, cries on the phone for 5 minutes and then hangs up because she hates getting emotional in front of the family. Small victories, enormous to us. Paying it forward. One of the things I do that feels most like home is setting up a summer internship program for young women interested in forensic accounting. We recruit from public universities and community colleges and give them real responsibility, tracing mock fund transfers, drafting compliance memos, even presenting to our senior team. Watching a student discover the way numbers reveal motives is as satisfying as closing a complex case. At Hamilton, I insist our hiring panels look beyond CVs. We include case competitions in our interviews so candidates who don't have fancy internships, but do have instinct and grit get the chance to show it. We do it partly because it's the right thing to do, and partly because it makes us better at our jobs. A quiet ceremony. 2 years after Hartfield, at a modest ceremony with people who mattered most. Alex, my closest friends from Morrison and Hamilton, my parents, and a handful of my interns. I accept a professional award for contributions to forensic accounting. When I step up to the podium, I don't rehearse what I want to say, I let it come. People ask me if I ever thought I'd be here, I say, holding the award, my voice steady. The truth is I never planned to be an icon. I planned to show up and do the work honestly and carefully. Forensic accounting isn't glamorous, it's painstaking, it's patient. It asks you to see the evidence and then choose the right thing every single time. If my work helped keep people's pensions safe, their jobs intact, and our markets more honest, then every ledger I ever pored over was worth it. I look out at the faces I know, some still skeptical, many now allies, and think of the long private dinners with Dad and the cold nights in the studio apartment when I wondered if I should have stayed quiet to keep the peace. I do not regret the choices that led me here. I only understand them more. The last scene. Late one evening, months later, I stand at my office window with a flute of champagne. The city lights line the river like a ledger of lives unfolding, entries and exits, debits and credits. Alex leans against the doorway, reading over my shoulder as I skim a draft for an upcoming policy brief on fund segregation requirements. "You okay?" he asks. I sip the champagne and feel the glass steady in my hand. "I am," I say. "I have a life I built for myself, a job that matters, people who trust me." He smiles. "You're still the person who sees patterns everyone else misses." "Yeah," I say, and then add, because it's the truth and because I finally get to say it aloud, and I don't apologize for it anymore. Outside, the river keeps moving, indifferent and honest. Inside, in that room with the city laid out below us, I realize that the tremor of that old champagne glass, so familiar in my memory, a symbol of smallness and exposure, has been replaced by something else. A steady hand, sure in its purpose, ready for the next ledger, the next life to help rebuild. The work continues, the people keep needing someone to follow the money and tell the true story. I put my glass down, stand beside Alex, and together we turn back to the files waiting on my desk.